We are live. 2 o'clock on the dot, and we have three amazing guests. 4 would be including me. I am so happy to see you all. I'm Sarah Sudachan, Senior Vice President at the California Association of Realtors. And under my umbrella is the DEI efforts that CAR puts out. Woman Up is one of them. Also our fair housing and our work with multicultural associations like AREAA. So we're really excited that May is Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And so I'll get more into that. We'll be highlighting some of the amazing Asian and Pacific Islander women in our community, starting with today's. Other Woman Up updates are tickets are going on sale June 1st. Again, tickets are going on sale June 1st. I expect tickets to sell out. So I'd love for you to put that date on your calendar. Fatima is putting a link in the chat, and thank you, Katie, for the info on our first in-person Woman Up event in 3 years. So get on our calendars, join us, look at the link that says join us and sign up to get notified when tickets are going on sale, and that will be on June 1st. We are very much looking forward to being in person and outside near the beach, Huntington Beach. And we just came back from a week-long event in Sacramento, where I know Amy was there, and we had over 2,500 realtors at our Ledge Day. The governor came to speak, the governor of California. We had legislators speak. We had so many amazing guests, and just the energy was incredible. So I wanted to give a shout out to Amy, who was there and just working hard on the behalf of homeowners and affordable housing in California. And I did want to talk about a big area of focus in our talks with our legislators last week is about the affordability of housing and housing supply. So we do have a press release we're going to pop in the chat so that you know what we entered into a coalition, realtors, home builders, and affordable housing producers and legislators, all to hopefully allocate a greater portion of the state's budget surplus to the construction of affordable owner-occupied housing and down payment assistance programs. So we're really excited about that. That's it for CAR and Woman Up updates. I'd love to get into the conversation of the hour, and that again, May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I wrote an article, we'll share a link to this. And so there's a lot of background in this article about the history, about why May is Asian American, I'm going to just call it AAPI for short, Heritage Month. In the 70s, President Carter, something is happening with my computer and it wants me to restart. So that's lovely. It always happens, right? So we're just going to power through this. So in the 70s, President Carter signed a resolution to make a week in May Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Week, and it turned into a month in the 90s. And May is important because it signifies the first Japanese immigrant arrival to the United States, as well as the Chinese workers who worked on the Transcontinental Railroad, and that was also completed in May. And so, and what we know, that's the history, and what we know today is that the Asian community is the fastest growing population cohort in the United States. Fall at 82%, they're growing at a clip of 82%, and Pacific Islanders are growing right behind them at 73%. Asians make up 7% of the US population. They make up 24 million voices and 24 distinct ethnicities and cultures. So today I'm proud to introduce our special guest speakers, and I'm going to read their bios because they are, again, I know you all know them. They're Woman Up and AREAA royalty, but Amy Kong is past president of AREAA. We love Amy, and she's an immigrant from Hong Kong. She served the San Francisco and mid-peninsula real estate market since 1988. So she's a veteran real estate agent. She has, actually a broker. She's a co-founder of Trust Real Estate in San Bruno, California. Honesty and integrity are core values in her business and in her community outreach. And she's also highly involved at her local, state, and national association, and is the 2021 Asian Real Estate Association of America, AREAA, national president. She's bilingual in English and Cantonese. So Amy, welcome. We're happy to have you. We're going to get into some real deep conversations and what you did as president of AREAA last year. Hope Atuel is the executive director for AREAA. So she's been the executive director since 2012. Her professional experience spans private and nonprofit sectors. She's has experience in nonprofit association management. Over the last 2 decades, her experience has been working with big companies such as Harlan Financial Solutions, Crane Company, and Westfield Corporation. There's one right around the corner from me. Throughout her career, Hope has been involved in launching successful B2B marketing campaigns with strong focus on customer growth and retention. She's a graduate of the Olivet Nazarene University in Illinois, and also conducted her graduate studies in multicultural communications from DePaul University in Chicago. So Hope, we are so happy to have you. And last but definitely not least, Vanessa Shields is the Deputy Director at AREAA, the largest AAPI membership-based nonprofit trade organization in the United States. So I want to hear more about that because I've heard it from different aspects. So that's huge, and they are fighting for homeownership and advancing homeownership for Asian and Pacific Islander communities. Their mission is to promote sustainable homeownership opportunities. And prior to joining AREAA, Vanessa worked as an agent. So she was a realtor for Pacific Sotheby's International Realty down in San Diego. And she also produced an architectural lecture series. So she's got an interesting real estate and design background, conceptualizing open houses, and featured around design and food. So we'll get into that. Vanessa's passion is about cultivating and supporting communities across disciplines, and we are so thrilled to have you all 3 of you, amazing, powerful Asian and AAPI women. So I would love to get into some of the origin stories. Maybe you can sprinkle in a little bit of the origins of AREAA. And let's start with you, Hope. And welcome.
All right, I better make sure that I'm unmuted. Okay, you can start with me, Sarah.
We're starting with the executive director.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Oh,
Sorry.
my technology is going nuts today. Excuse me. So tell us about your leadership story,
Sure.
how you got involved with AREAA, and how you came to be the executive director. How about that?
Yeah. So my I guess I could start with why I was introduced to AREAA. So I was introduced to AREAA. I was with another trade organization in Chicago, and I was in their membership and marketing. I was heading up their membership and marketing departments, and they looked around the room with, with the key executives there. They looked around the room and said, we need to have a much more diverse membership base. And they looked at me because I'm the woman and the non-white in the room, and they said, you probably have a lot of background and a lot of experience in diversity. So why don't you expand our diversity initiative? And I just, rolled my eyes, and it's like, all right, this is so typical, right? They look at the non-white for diversity initiatives. So I said, all right, let me do that. And I'm familiar with NAREB because they have been in existence for many, many years, brought about by the Civil Rights Movement, National Association of Real Estate Brokers. And at that time, in the early 2000s, NAREP was fairly new, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. And I said, is there an organization for Asian Americans, for people like me? And the first person I reached out to was Fred Underwood, formerly the diversity director of NAR. And he said, funny you should ask. They just formed, and this was literally in 2003, they just formed an organization that focuses, they meaning Alan and John, just formed an organization that focuses on Asian Americans. And he said, why don't you fly out to DC? I'll introduce you. There's a fundraiser, blah, blah, blah. And that was how I actually got introduced to AREAA. And that time, Jim Park was still with Freddie. So this was a long, long time ago. We were still all young. And I thought, wow, this is actually a neat organization, right? I've never been involved or have been introduced in an organization that focused on Asian Americans. A lot of the organizations that I knew was more ethnic based. So I'm Filipino American. So a lot of the organizations that I was familiar with that had some Asian flavor to it was more Filipino based, Filipino American based. And so to actually be introduced to an organization that supported all subgroups, all ethnicities within the Asian culture was something fairly new. And I thought, how are they going to do this? Because that's going to be hard. And so I kept in contact with John and Alan and Jim as well. And John and Alan, if you don't know their story, their personal story, and how it's woven into the history of AREAA, it's just simply inspiring. And I don't think that we will have time for that, but I think I was inspired by John and Alan, and how Jim at Freddie back then wanted to invest funding for AREAA because he believed in the mission of AREAA, which is to increase homeownership opportunities, sustainable homeownership opportunities for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And so when they were searching for an executive director, I'd ask what that was all about. And Alan's like, well, come on, fly to San Diego and we'll talk about it and we'll interview you. And, the rest is history, as they say. And that was the origin for why I got involved into AREAA. For the leadership position, I don't think that I was intentionally looking for leadership roles, quite honestly, in my career. I want to say that it happened tangentially, not intentionally, because there were very, very few, I want to say leadership and role models for me growing up as an Asian American. And one in particular that I could see in television back then, and this is probably dating me, was Connie Chung, right? Connie Chung was probably one of the few Asian Americans who I've seen in TV consistently on a professional level. And so I didn't want to be a broadcaster, but those were very few. And so when I had my first management position, that was also very scary for me. Again, because I didn't really know very many Asian Americans who were in management and leadership positions. And I know that we're going to talk about books, but one of the books that my sister actually gave me is called The Princessa by Harriet Rubin. And it talks about you being as a woman and actually using your womanhood in a leadership position. And I think that book has helped me really find my voice and find my identity as a woman in a leadership position. So that's my history, Sarah.
Wow. Well, you touched on so many things that often hold not only women, Asian women, but women of color and women in general back, is that they don't see themselves in these roles. So I do want to dig deeper into that because there are not a lot of Asian women leaders until, like, I think Amy Kong was one for me. I was like, she's badass, excuse my French, but I was so impressed. And that's where you get the inspiration and it perpetuates. So thank you for sharing that. And we'll dig a little bit deeper. Before I get into Amy, I'd love to hear how Vanessa got involved with AREAA, and what is your origin story and your why behind being AREAA's deputy director.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting. I've been attracted to leadership roles actually since I was younger. I was that person that ran for student body president in high school and in college. And, I think for me, there was something exciting about leadership. But my career kind of has gone in many different directions. In my 20s, I was in New York pursuing a career in the fashion industry. And, I think kind of coming back home to San Diego was really important for me in terms of identity. I grew up with a mom who's was born in the Philippines and raised in the Philippines, and a father who's also an immigrant as well from New Zealand. So, I didn't really have a lot of that, I guess, traditional American upbringing when you have parents kind of telling you what direction to go in terms of leadership. And so I was really just kind of on a new direction in San Diego. I pursued real estate, as you mentioned earlier, Sarah. And I think for me, there was like a bigger calling in terms of having a role in nonprofit work. I felt really called to have that experience. And I knew that, for me, identity and culture and leadership as well has always played a big role. So AREAA was an exciting opportunity. And, I met Hope through an introduction, and I was very excited to have a Filipino boss that I could see myself in. And it's been really great. I think I'm truly inspired by so many people at AREAA. Obviously, we have great founders. We have, Alan, John, and Jim, and they're incredible in their own rights. But then we have all these amazing past national chairs. We have all these amazing past committee chairs. So the depth of leadership in AREAA and the diversity and leadership in AREAA is just pretty inspiring to be able to work with.
Very much so. And AREAA has grown from its origin to, I think it's your 10-year anniversary. Is that right? Next year?
20.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm time warped. You're right. 20 years. And I remember meeting John for the first time when I first started at CAR, and just the inspiration and the spark that now is not a behemoth, but it's a huge force in the Asian community in real estate. So yay. Anyway, okay, Amy, you are on a little bit of a different path because you were elected officer of AREAA, and also during a time that was really kind of crazy, 2021. So I'd love to hear why you got involved with AREAA and what your leadership story is there.
Sarah, so thank you so much, for having us today. I tell you, my AREAA life got so happy because of these two women here on the call as well. I'll share more with that, but how I get involved with AREAA, interestingly, is very, very different, and my leadership growth and path is very different from Vanessa. Vanessa is like, hey, when I'm little, I'm determined, right? But I'm not. When I was like back in Hong Kong, I'm the youngest daughter in my family, right? And I'm the one that follow all my sisters, my brother, whatever that they say, I do it, right? I always listen to my parents and never really do anything to quote unquote lead, because I'm a good girl. I listen, right? I follow. The only time I step up and really speak up for myself was when I graduated from high school and my father said, okay, that's it, you go to work. I'm like, what? I wanted to continue my education, but Dad refused. He said, no, 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 you're done. So on that day, you know what? I ran out of the house and I ran someplace else. And I refused to go home just because I wanted to pursue more education. So that's the first time ever, I step up and, speak for myself. But long story short is that, afterwards I got an opportunity to come to the US. Of course, landed my first job as a real estate practitioner. But I saw a lot of interesting deals within the community. And I was asking myself, is this really how realtor run the business, right? I don't really want it to be like that. It's not really, anything, encouraging, right? But at some point of time, I guess I'm lucky. I met John Wong. But I tell you, I met John Wong in Shanghai, not here in the Bay Area. I met him in Shanghai when I was taking my CRB class, because at the time, there's a whole bunch of things that I don't know. So I took all these classes, right? CRB, CRS, all kinds of stuff. But of course, from that point on, once you met John Wong, he will lead you to here and there. And then I got a chance to meet our great Alan Okamoto. So as Hope mentioned, these two gentlemen are very, very different, right? So both John and Alan really, excuse me, gave me a lot of opportunity to involve in a lot of volunteer activities, right? And I learned a lot from these two gentlemen. I really have no idea. Hey, realtors do advocate for policy change? I have no idea. And I found that John's childhood actually got really affected by the Chinese Exclusion Act. Sarah, I tell you, I just finished my California broker renewal license classes, and I was so struggled with all this history. But I tell you, after I completed, I love it. And when I learned from John, really, Chinese Exclusion Act is not like 100 years ago. It's so recent that the fact this gentleman is still alive, right? Mm-hmm. And Alan Okamoto shared about his family encounter, how his family got being put into the concentration camp. And even though after they come out, they lost everything that they established. Even though Alan Okamoto's father was a practitioner at the time, right? But the San Francisco Association of Realtors board of directors voted not to grant him membership at SFAR just because he's Japanese. Mm-hmm. I was like, seriously? These things happen here in the America that I'm migrating to? I was so surprised. But what truly inspired me from these two gentlemen is that they never turned themselves into the angry birds. Instead, they worked so hard, travel around the country to share their story and advocate for changes. Absolutely. Show how Asians are. With the AREAA platform, I continue to grow my leadership skill. Not that many people will look down on me just because I don't speak perfect English, right? We all work closely together just to give back and encourage each other to do better. So that's how I really get tied into AREAA.
I love that. I love that. And there's so many things that you've touched on that matter so much for women in business, and women in the real estate industry in particular. And that is, Woman Up was created to be supportive and inclusive, right? And that includes men. And where you see John Wong and Alan Okamoto taking you, Amy, and Hope and Vanessa under their wing, and really having you be included in the story and included in that growth process of AREAA, I think that's beautiful. And you also touched on something else, and that is, when you look at the historical challenges, specifically for the Asian community, and that's what we're here to talk about, right? you would be surprised. Like there's certain things when I was doing my research for writing this article that I wrote for CAR for AAPI month, I was actually shocked at some of the things I never learned in college, in high school, in elementary school. I was shocked. And it's really important to note that history. There has been the Chinese Exclusion Act. There's been so many different laws that have held back the Asian community in particular. Yet you see the growth in not only in population, but in home ownership. And that is a testament to the grit and perseverance of this community overall. And then you have to look at each individual group to see, well, what was holding this group back? So it's not just one big group. It's, again, these distinct voices and cultures that have had distinct levels of, you know, discrimination or being held back. And so I just want to honor that. And that's why we're here to talk today. And actually that leads me into my next question, which is all about what you ladies are doing next week. And that's your 2022 Diversity and Fair Housing Summit in DC. And I'm not sure what number this is, but it's when you all get together, and I'm so excited to be speaking at your event. But you also go and talk to legislators and unveil some research that you've been doing for several years. So why don't we start, and we'll put the link to the conference in the chat. And like I said, in case you're in the DC area and want to join, you can check it out. But Vanessa, let's start with you, because you're really close with the research and what you can share with us before next week. I know that it's being unveiled next week, but let's talk about some of the research inside the AAPI community and what you're doing with that for your policy conference.
Thank you, Sarah. And I know she's here, but Monica LaCrue, big shout out to her. We used to work together on staff, and Monica's at Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac has been one of our most important partners on the State of Asia America report, because they help us with the narrative of disaggregated data and how important it is when we're talking about the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And so in this year's report, as well as last year's and the year prior, you're able to see the homeownership rate, how it differentiates between all of these AAPI subgroups. And now this year, you know, we're trying to broaden that narrative so we can look at disaggregated data of not just homeownership rate, but also mortgage readiness, and really kind of see where the opportunities lie around the country. Obviously in California, we know there's a lot of APIs, but we also have heard in the news that there's been an exodus from California. And so we're also examining where, because of affordability, where a lot of APIs are deciding to move. Some of these areas are pretty unexpected. And so we're getting into that in this year's report, and also really why they're moving there, whether it be educational reasons, whether it be work opportunities. Sometimes it's religious reasons, and even, you know, the refugee communities that have been established and how they've grown. So it's really exciting to have the report come out this year, because we're not only providing research, we're providing history about the API experience. And so it's a great tool for anybody who's interested in really not just learning, but maybe even learning more to help them, you know, not just in their professional lives, but also just in their, you know, desire to grow from what they know. I think Hope's going to touch a little bit more about the survey, but that's also really exciting. We have original data that we're sharing this year, and I'll let Hope share more about that.
Yeah, and Hope, please chime in at any time. I think that's really important that we're talking about it. And in particular, there's lots of research out there, but what AREAA is doing is designing research around the AAPI community as it pertains to homeownership and housing. So that's what I want to applaud you all for that, because that's important. But Hope, please chime in.
Yeah. So just to add to what Vanessa had said, but let me just take a step back. Sarah, you had mentioned that May is AAPI Heritage Month, right? So that's why Historically, that is when we go to DC and do our Hill visits and lobby for priorities that are important for our organization. We believe that these priorities, particularly on a federal level, are the ones that really would move the needle of homeownership for our community. And decisions are made in DC. A lot of decisions are made in DC as we know it. And so it's important that we show up in DC and we have a presence in DC. And that's why we're very thankful that Vanessa now is in DC. She's going to be our primary staff person there. But you talked about, Vanessa, you talked about the survey, and this is original survey. It's been a long time since AREAA had actually conducted or commissioned original survey. I think the last time was back in 2011 when a survey was commissioned to UCLA, their joint Asian American studies regarding just homeownership in general. And the survey that we have commissioned this year was to take a look at the impact of hate crimes and its effect on our mobility as a community. As Vanessa had said, from the research and the data that we have from Freddie Mac, we see where migration patterns are, right? Non-traditional MSAs, whether it's Tennessee or Oklahoma or the Dakotas. What we want to find out is in the last 2.5 years, because of the anti-Asian rhetoric that has plagued our community, has this changed attitudes and behaviors of our community members in their relocation and their mobility. Because, you know, housing is a right? It is a basic right. Shelter is a basic right. And any American should be able to live in any area that they want to. But unfortunately, that shelter, there is this insecurity that has happened in the last 2 years because of hate crimes that have been happening against our community. And, you know, it's even places like San Francisco and New York and Oakland where there's dense population of Asian Americans. So we have heard anecdotally from our community members and our members as well as they serve clients that there is this hesitation to move to places where there might not necessarily be a large population of Asian Americans because of fear. And that's unfortunate because, you know, it's sort of like we are living, rewind 30, 40, 50 years ago before the Fair Housing Act. So back to the survey, we wanted to actually take a look at the attitudes of home buyers. And that's what we're going to be unveiling next week is how has this anti-Asian and hate crimes impacted home buyers' attitudes and behaviors. And then related to that, we also did a member survey on what they're finding out from their clients as well. So from a real estate perspective, real estate practitioner perspective, we've also asked that similar question. So lots of great data to share next week, especially that we're also doing this collection of subgroup information as well, right? I mean, it's easy to just put us all in a bucket of Asian Americans, but as you've alluded to, Sarah, there's very, very different subgroups and ethnicities and nuances, and it should be interesting to talk about that next week.
I love that. And, you know, you can, if you're interested in getting a copy of the report, you can sign up and we'll put the link in the chat. So, and in our show notes. So I'd love to ask Amy. So one of the things that I really admired about your leadership of AREAA during 2021 was the way you stood up for crimes against Asian, you know, hate, essentially. And I'd love to hear from your perspective how this resonates and how it resonates maybe with your clientele as well.
Yeah, Sarah, it was certainly heartbroken, right? honestly, I do not want it to even remember what
Yeah.
had happened and what are the scenes that we have seen on TV or even happened in my backyard in my neighborhood across the bay in Oakland, right? So of course, Hope kind of mentioned a lot about, our community ended up got so worried, right? Not just happening on the news, even though daily when I was talking to my friends from church, people will share how worried they are, especially, their senior parents that are living by themselves, or they have to make all kinds of adjustment, aside from all these lockdown and everything, to make sure their parents are being protected.
Yeah.
Everyone basically just live in fear on top of all these loneliness due to isolation, right? Folks are looking into moving away from their home, like those folks that live in Oakland, especially in the Chinatown area. Those are more affordable area considerably here in the Bay Area already. Why do you have to move away, right? At the time, it's like mixed feeling. Okay, what the heck is going on? What we can do. To me, it's all about what we can do to make it better, right? As I mentioned to you earlier, I learned from the founder, instead of being angry and or revenge or doing things that are harming others, what we can do better collectively so that we will be able to make a positive change, right? So of course, the very first person I talked to was Hope, right? And at the time we were like, that totally affect homeownership. We cannot allow and we cannot afford our homeownership rate to roll back, right? So what we have done, we voice out. During the president's call with all my chapter leaders, I encourage them all to step up and voice out and participate in any of the organized peace demonstration in the local area. Really be the voice of the voiceless, right? We also, Hope and Vanessa is really, really good. Vanessa is really creative, I tell you. We put together a video series to share with others on who AAPI are, because I feel like a lot of the times that people discriminate or they have perception on something is basically because they don't understand, they don't know, right? So we have to let them know who we are, what our backgrounds look like, right? How we came to America. We're not here to beg your money. We're here to contribute to the community, right? So on top of that, of course, we also support and participate with Congresswoman Grace Mann's effort for policy change, right? But I tell you, after these incidents, number one, I signed up for national president. I do not sign up for this. But I tell you, when incidents happen, we as a leader, we truly have to step up and work together with other people. I tell you, I'm so thankful, even though up till today, I'm so thankful that all of my local chapter leaders step up out of their comfort zone and work together to really pop up the voices here and there, here all over the country. Their hearts pours out to their local communities. And I tell you, I cannot be any more proud to all of my 2021 chapter presidents. They are all our heroes.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Well, I think that's so important is what you did, Amy, was you took action, right? You didn't sit back and just wallow. You took action and you were in a powerful position to be able to spread that action and amplify that action across your chapters and across the nation. So kudos to you and kudos to AREAA for that, because I do want to say that AREAA had led the way in standing up for the voices and for the different diverse voices within the AAPI community. So for anyone that's listening, I'd love to be able to offer words of advice and wisdom to share on how to become better allies, maybe how to support the AAPI community. And I'm tongue twisted today. Anyone want to go first? Maybe Vanessa, or you had some good ideas on our prep call. I'd love to hear them.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional hearing Amy talk. It's just talking with your, we always hear about sphere of influence in the real estate community. And I think that it's important to talk about these issues in our spheres to really help each other understand, not just what's going on, but why it's going on, how we can support those that we know, or, at AREAA, we get a lot of outreach from all over the country. And luckily, California is, one of the most diverse places in the nation, but there's places, for example, there's an association that reached out a few months ago in a smaller town in Illinois. And they wanted to partner with us because, they wanted to help educate their members about what's going on. The woman on the phone from the association, she had a daughter at a high school who had a friend that was getting bullied. And it was just terrible to kind of hear that was happening. And, I could tell that as a mother, as somebody in the community, she was concerned, and she just wanted to be able to help in whatever way she could, educate people, about discrimination and I think that that's always a hard conversation to have. It's always a hard conversation to have with people who aren't like us, but I think that that compassion and really compassion really comes from understanding, and having these hard conversations is really, in my opinion, one of the most important things to do with the people that we have relationships with.
I agree. I think that you hit the nail on the head, and that's why education and knowing the history and knowing the background is really important. Hope or Amy, do you want to add to?
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah. Hope knows that when I wanted to say something. Well, Sarah, I think a lot of the times the Asian are perceived to be like a foreigner.
That's
why?
true.
Because the society never show us exist, right? If you look at any of this research data, you only see what? White, Black, Hispanic, other. What does that mean by other? So if people started to be kind of like, our California Association Realtor, the 2021 California Housing Affordability Index, I see a column, Asian. John
Before I
Wong.
can help with that, I need to know who's speaking.
Ooh,
Open the home app on your
Okay,
iPhone.
it wasn't just me, Amy.
I'm
Select
sorry,
your name,
it's my,
and enable recognize my
Siri's
voice.
going nuts today.
I'm sorry.
Mercury must be in retrograde, I'm telling you.
I mean, showing the AAPI data in all the research and everything is very important. It helps us exist.
Yeah,
I think if you really wanted to help, do that.
absolutely.
Hope, back to you.
Right.
How do
Thanks.
we become better supporters of AAPI?
Yeah, for what Amy and Vanessa had said is stay connected and be engaged in the community, right? And there are very, very different ways on how you can be engaged in the community, whether it's through faith-based type of like engagement, or you're volunteering at a local, senior community center, or what have you, or even just educating and keeping your, like what Vanessa said, sphere of influence informed is very important. I think typically for Asian Americans, we are not that engaged, especially, in civic matters, right? But what we have seen at the last election is a spike in civic and voter engagement, and that has made a difference. So we can make a difference as a community. Yes, we're 7% of the population, but we're growing, as you said. And as one big voice, we could actually make a difference. And you might not see the results of what you're doing in a year or so, just like what we're doing in policy. You know, you don't make a change and expect to see overnight the fruits of your labor. Sometimes it takes decades. And I know for John, for Jim and Alan, I don't think that they quite expected AREAA to be this a force to be reckoned with after 2 decades. But here we are because of the inspiration and the vision. And it could start from that. It could start as something as inspirational as what John and Alan have done. And you'll never know, you could inspire other people within the community to support your vision and mission. And so don't be afraid to be engaged and get connected with the community.
I love that. How does one get connected with AREAA in particular?
Well, we've got 42. I don't want to sound like I'm a marketing.
I asked the question. It's okay.
I know. So we've got 42. Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong. 42 chapters.
We just added one.
43 chapters. But you know, you take a look at where Asian Americans live, and that pretty much mirrors the chapter footprint of AREAA. We might be missing some, you know, some chapters here and there. I know Jim's been asking for a New Orleans chapter. I know we need to probably start one somewhere in Tennessee or Oklahoma City. But you take a look at where the population is, and you know, we're a lot of us are here in California. It matches that. So go to areaa.org. There's a drop down that says chapters, or if you want, just sign up to be a national member, or you don't have to be a member to be engaged with AREAA. You can just join one of our events. May, again, is Asian American Heritage Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I know a lot of our chapters are going to be doing something, whether it's a food drive or cleaning up somebody's backyard. That's, you know, just look at the website and look at events, and you can just simply, you know, check us out through our events or through some of our social media posts.
I love that. And it really is about the power in the community, and Woman Up is a powerful community for women, right? And AREAA is a powerful community that touches every single, has support for every single distinct ethnicity under the AAPI umbrella. One of the things that we love to talk about in the Woman Up community is mentorship and role models, because that is really one of our, they're two of our core pillars. So, and we know that education and mentorship and if you see it, you can be it, right? The role modeling is so important for women in particular, but it's important for everyone. So I'd love to switch gears a little and ask each of you to share maybe some trusted and treasured advice that you've received from a mentor. And Amy, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you. That makes it easier. Well, during the leadership opportunity here in AREAA, I witnessed that love and respect truly means how these two words actually can move things along so well. They're not politics, right? They're basic human being interaction attitude. So try to think about that. Love and respect.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Amy. How about you, Hope?
Yeah, I'm gonna cry. And when Amy talks about love and respect, for me, one of the best advice I think that has been given to me by one of my mentors was to always operate in truth, right? Because when you operate in truth, there's nothing that can dispute that. So always be truthful, even if it's going to be hurt, not that you want to be intentionally hurtful, but you want to obviously make sure that the delivery of the truth is also like what Amy had said is done with love and respect. But truth is always going to trump over things that are untrue, obviously. So stick with it and stay with it and present it. So.
I love that. It reminds me of a powerful chat we had with Nina Dosanjh, who's also AREAA member. And she spoke at our virtual event on an island in Verbella for 2020, our virtual 2020 Women Up event. And it was about being authentically you, and it goes to both of what you are sharing with us. And that's important as leaders, to live with ourselves, to not, to lead with our hearts and our truths. So thank you. All right, Vanessa, what about you?
Okay. I was just marinating on this while I was listening to Amy and Hope, but I think that for me, I grew up with, again, parents, immigrant parents. I saw my mom work 5 days a week plus weekends. She was a full-time working mom, and they wanted to find a way to send us to college. So they bought some rental properties and, spent a lot of that time working. And so I think growing up, my normal idea of what it's like is to work all the time, and I think that, having experiences like I've had being an entrepreneur now, in this role, I've really learned the importance of self-care, and also just realizing boundaries, I think, with work. And I think especially for women, immigrant women, I think specifically, there's even more pressure to establish themselves. And I think it's been really empowering for me to have a boss, who really doesn't make me feel guilty when I need to take care of the things I need to take care of outside of work. And so I think that the support, I think the mentorship advice for me, I think, is just supporting others and in the ways that are with love and respect, that Amy shared. So that's it for me.
I love that. I love that. Well, one of the other things that we love to go over in our wisdom session is leadership lessons or powerful learning lessons that you've gained along your journey, each of your journey. And Hope and Vanessa, you both are employees of AREAA, right? You serve the industry from a different perspective. So I'd love to hear your perspective on, a powerful learning lesson, and then we'll move on to Amy in terms of, the volunteer side and servant leadership lesson. So Hope, let's start with Vanessa.
I just went, okay.
No, that's okay.
So tell me again, Sarah. So tell me again, you wanted me to share more about
a lesson you've learned along the way. Specifically, I'm gonna call you out as a working mom, as you shared with us.
Okay. Yeah.
And you've had young kids through the pandemic and remote schooling. Was there any powerful lessons you learned? I mean, I could share several.
I think for me is just, it's going back to Hope's advice with honesty. It's just like, we're only one person, there's only so much we can do and accomplish. And I think my biggest mistake is thinking that I could manage it without, being truthful. And I've had heart-to-hearts with both Hope and Amy saying, realizing that I've had limitations. And so I think that that's been really the biggest mistake, is thinking that I can manage it by myself, and knowing when I can, I'm getting emotional, but knowing when I can ask for help.
Well, that's how, I think that's the difference that you have in your relationship, and the trusted relationship you have with your mentor and boss, right? I think that's an important piece. And I love, thank you for sharing. That was I had that for a long time with my former boss and fellow co-founder of Woman Up, Leslie Appleton Young. So I feel you 1,000%. Hope.
Let me unmute myself. Okay. Yeah. So for me, one of the things that I've learned in my role, in a leadership role, is finding, really, when you're managing people, you're finding what their true calling is. And Vanessa talked about this. And oftentimes, I think we look at the word calling as something that is spiritual, right? You're called to be a pastor, you're called to be this, a missionary. But I think we're all called to do something. And when at least this is how I've managed and I've led teams, is I have to take a look at what their calling is, because that's where they're going to thrive and they're going to flourish and they're going to enjoy what they're doing, is they're actually doing what they're called to do. And sometimes it can be a challenge because, actually looking at people that way and trying to get that from individuals whom you work with requires a little bit of openness and transparency. And, sometimes we don't really live transparent lives, as you've said, Sarah. Sometimes we live duplicitous lives. What we are at work can be very different from what we are at home. And so that could be a challenge. But for me, again, taking a look at and cultivating somebody's calling is, and then actually seeing their success because of that calling and because they can flourish in that particular vocation, for me, is a gift as a leader. Then you're seeing really what you're called to do, which is to lead people. So that's my leadership insight.
It's beautiful. And Deborah's not with me today. She's on vacation, taking some precious time, but this is her, like, you're speaking her language, because how she helps support leaders is to make sure that the leaders operate from their core values, and that the leaders know what their core values of their employees and their people that on their team or in their sphere, what their values are. And you lead with that knowledge in hand. So I love that. That's speaking the Woman Up gospel right here. All right, Amy, close us out.
Well, I'm a volunteer, so I can do whatever I want. Right? But that's not true. That's not true. In running an organization with so much history and passion in there, I guess the important thing is that really truly identify talent. Okay. If someone is really good at social media, you don't just ask that person to write essay. Okay. So for someone like me that don't speak English very well, don't ask me to write any speech. Okay. I'll just talk. Identify talent. Number two is that I found a lot of our real estate practitioner volunteers, most of the people are high D, right? They want it, they're right there, right? And they're soloist. Most of the people are soloists, meaning that they run the entire show. But if you're a volunteer in an organization, you really have to let the rest of the people work together with you to make a bigger thing happen. So yeah. I think I really wanted to share this time. Of course, there are a lot more things that I really gain and learn from working with AREAA national staffs. But I guess because we have limited time, just leave it that way.
I love it. Well, we did hit the hour, so I'd love to hear. We have so much wisdom coming from these three women. So thank you so much for being here. And maybe just a final words of wisdom to set us off on our weekend and into DC next week.
Okay, let me go first, Sarah.
Okay, go, Amy.
Okay, all right. So I just wanted to say one thing. No matter whether you believe it or not, no matter whether you're a believer or not, at the beginning, remember, there is only Adam and Eve. There is no color difference. We're all created equal. Therefore, we should all be treated equally. That's all I wanted to say.
Amen. Amen.
All right, I'll go next and I'll go really fast. I'll use a quote from one of my favorite books, The Little Prince, when the fox shares with the little prince his secret. And he says, "It is only with the heart that one sees clearly. What is essential is invisible to the eyes." So
Beautiful.
a little bit profound, but it's a children's book. And I love that book. That's my go-to book because it's got so many adult truths to it.
So many. Thank you, Hope. Vanessa, close us out.
Oh my gosh, I have nothing right now. I'm so sorry.
How about your go-to read? Because I know you wanted to share some books with us.
Oh, I did. Okay, I have two. I had two that I shared prior. One of them is an Instagram phenomenon. The holistic psychologist published a book called How to Do the Work. I am very inspired by self-awareness, and I think the more we can understand who we are on a psychological level, we can only deepen our relationships professionally and personally. So I highly recommend her book, How to Do the Work. And the second one is I guess D&I related. It's The Breath of a Walk. I heard Grace Young speak at NYU at a lecture, gosh, 10 years ago. It's probably one of the best lectures I've ever heard. She's a Chinese American woman who's been a champion for saving Chinatowns, not just in New York, but throughout the country. And she's an intellectual that decided to write cookbooks. And so Breath of a Walk allows you to not learn more about Chinese culture, but just the experience of cooking and how it can be transformative. So I highly recommend that one too.
I love it. Thank you so much, ladies. We love our partnership. And if I failed to mention this earlier, AREAA is a proud sponsor of Woman Up and vice versa. So we love you, ladies. Thank you so much. And I look forward to a successful conference next week. And we will see you all at our in-person event, August 30th, 31st, and September 1st. So thank you all and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Fatima.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.